What size bars do you run and why? The first part of that question is something that I set out to find the answer to, or at least do some research on yesterday after having a conversation with Carl Hinckley on the phone, talking to him and trying to decide which 3 sizes he should make for the next run of the Nowhere BMX 4-piece handlebars. And through that, I'm like, well, maybe I'll just make a poll on Instagram and get people's direct feedback and find out exactly what size bars that they run. And through that, I discovered and just finally put thought into the fact that there is a lot of nuance when it comes to bar rise that people choose. And a lot of those things don't have anything to do with anything other than the look or how tall someone is, how long their arms are, what they prefer. There's just so many options out there and so many different reasons to pick different things that it is a really crazy topic to dive into. I have notes, I have pictures of results, I have a follow-up question that I asked, results from that, and an example of someone's response for that. And ultimately, it all goes into just asking the question, what size bars do people actually buy and ride? And this is something that I never thought I would really care about, but in the past, I've done polls to find answers to questions for things with alienation, like when the Venus hub was being contemplated and different options for that were trying to be figured out as far as drive side and hub guards and things like that go. I put polls up on Instagram and I realized I could do that for the bar size question and maybe putting this data out there because I essentially just did a research study with a sample size of, let's see, 1,500 people or more were asked the question, and I have responses from probably close to 500 of them. So a sample size of 500 BMX riders, from younger kids who ride to adults, full-grown adults, people who ride trails, skate parks, flatland, everything is in there. Even Chris Doyle responded to this poll. So it's cool. I didn't actually scroll through some of the other responses, but he had a size outside of the ones that I listed in my poll here. And so he replied saying the size bars that he rides. So let's just dive into this data because I think it's pretty interesting. And the main sizes that I put out there were 9, 925, 95, and 975. Those were the main sizes that I thought would be the most votes. And there's probably a bias in this poll towards people who have these sizes, because if you didn't, I put, if you have below 9 or above 975, send a message. And that is what this paper is for. There are over 85 people who messaged me with a different size. And I got everything from somebody who said 4.666 on their, what was it, fixed gear bike, to 6-inch rise. Justin Tate, Flatland guy, he said 6-inch rise, all the way up to people who ride the 12s. I think there's one person who rides the S&M 12-step bars. And this is such a fascinating topic to me because I feel like there's so many companies out there that probably just make all of these different sizes because that's what they've always done. There's nothing to indicate that they should stop other than maybe things not selling sometimes. And it's a pretty safe bet that if you make everything from 9 or 875 up to 10, that you're going to be able to sell it. If you mark it down a little bit, somebody will probably end up buying it. But the other topic of this question that came up almost immediately following this is like, okay, yeah, So you can't make 10 different size bars, you being Carl. Like Carl can't make 10 different sizes of the nowhere bars. So he has to narrow it down a little bit. And so the question then becomes, okay, well, if we'd only do 3 sizes, then that means there's certain people who would be in between those sizes that'll either have to change the amount of headset spacers they use or change the stem that they use. So I put another poll out there asking, would you ride a different stem to accommodate bar rise for bars that you really want to ride? And this got over 400 responses at the time of taking this screenshot, which was almost exactly like 22 hours after the previous one with the 1,564 views. This one is 24 hours. I took the screenshot. It's gonna go away any second now. So it's very close to being wrapped up. But the question here is pretty interesting because it's not something I ever considered. I have never really put that much thought into the stem that I ride until putting this question out here. And with that, I got all of these responses, and then I got a bunch of people sending me messages like this one from a dude named Luke. Luke said, as someone who prefers 4 to 5 degrees of upsweep and 10 or less of backsweep, options are limited enough that this is already how life is. So I asked just to confirm, so you would change the stem to accommodate bars. For sure, a lot more stem rise options than there are bars with Geo I really like. So I thought that that was fascinating, and I got a bunch more responses from people saying, yeah, I ride 9.5s and a front load. That was Drew Jackson. I had somebody else say I ride, or I've ridden in the past, the Nowhere 10-inch bars with a front load just to be able to ride the bars. So there's 144 people who said no. One person responded and said, no, S&M Challenger stem for life, which I thought was pretty funny. And there's always going to be those kinds of people. And I thought about it for myself, and I was like, man, would I change my stem just for a set of bars? And that is an interesting one, because if you think about different stem rise options, even in top load stems, you can get a stem that has 0 or 1 millimeters of rise on it, or you can get stems like the Odyssey Summit stem that they made that was something like 45 millimeters of rise, as well as like the stem that I ride, the Alienation Vault. I'm pretty sure that's like 33 millimeters. And I think that that's around an inch of rise. Let's find that out. How many inches are in... I can't speak. Let's start that over. Convert 33 millimeters to inches. Dang it. This is a slow part here. Convert 33 millimeters to inches.
Okay, I found this on the web for this is a slow part.
Oh my gosh. Regardless, it's around an inch. I know that. I'm just gonna 33 millimeters to inches, 1.29. So it's actually more than an inch and a quarter, more than that. So what you're getting to there is that you could just go anywhere in between there, because stems exist in between. And if you're still watching after that fumble of words, thank you. But you could go anywhere in between there, from 0, 1 millimeter of rise, all the way to 45, which 45 millimeters to inches is almost 2 inches, 1.77 inches, which is a lot. So you could ride a 45 millimeter rise stem, or even call it 40 millimeter and call it like an inch and a half, and ride 10-inch bars, and it's as if you have 8.5s. Or not, no, if you ride 8.5s and it's as if you have 10-inch bars. Or you could do the opposite, and you could ride 10s with 0 rise And it's the same as if you had 8.5s with that 45mm rise stem. So there's a lot of nuance in this conversation, and it brings up so many different factors. Headset spacers are another one. People riding different headset spacer amounts in order to get their bars where they like them. So this comes up in the conversation when you can only pick so many different rise bars to choose from. So basically the approach that Carl took here, and I'll get to the numbers here for this. So we have 8s, 5 people, 825s, 7 people. And I should say real quick too, there was a couple people who said like super specific sizes, like there was 8.675 or something crazy like that. I just lumped those into the closest measurement that was rounded off possible. So we have 8.5s was 11, 8.75s was 20, 8.8 was 9, and then above 9.75, we should pull up the other results here so we can have all of them on the screen. Above 9.75, we had 10 was 28, 10.25 was 2, and then 11 or 12 is 4. And then you can see I wrote at the bottom the question about would you ride a different stem to accommodate bars? And the overwhelming majority of that said yes. So there we have, let's do the math here. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70. Then we have 76, 79, 80, 83, 85, 86. So 86 responses on here. Let's do a little math here. 86 plus 113 plus 159 plus 128 plus 36.
86 plus 113 plus 159 plus 128 plus 36 is 522.
522 responses there. That is a pretty good sample size in BMX, I think, and it's pretty representative because we had flatland people. All of the flatland people that responded to me said 8.75 or lower. Most of them said 8.5. And so when I'm talking to Carl, he's picking, like, he was originally going to do 8s when we first started talking because he wants to have an option for kids. And then all these responses start rolling in. And I got a response from Presley's parents who run his account. Presley's a 9-year-old kid local to us here. He's riding 8.25s. And I'm like, well, if a kid who's riding a 14 and a 16-inch bike between the two bikes he has is riding 8.25s already, then maybe it doesn't make sense to do 8s because then they're going to have to change their stem even more, go even higher. And I got nobody on the lower end of things. And so what I thought made sense, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it doesn't, but what I thought made sense was to choose a size that had the most options or people that chose it, and then also had the most below or above it. And so what Carl ended up doing was picking 8.5s, I think, so that people who responded 8.75 could, if they really wanted nowhere bars, could get 8.5s and then a taller stem or add more headset spacers or what they might have to. And then people who ride 8.25s or 8s could ride a front load stem or take off headset spacers or make it work somehow that way. And so it kind of helps accommodate everybody there because you can't just pick everything. And I thought, man, we're doing all this research, or I'm doing all this research and getting 500 plus responses on this. I should probably put this out there so anybody who works for a company or does product designing can have that direct connection to the people who actually buy the stuff. Because you have to make these decisions, and in where BMX is at today, making these decisions based on actual info, and you could use sales data, I'm sure, as well, but it never hurts to have more information. So now you can combine this actual info from what people ride when all options are present, not just the ones that you sell. Combine that with the sales data for the ones you sell, and maybe you slim down on what you offer. The other thing that this brings into, as far as nuance and conversation goes, is head tube height, fork steer tube length. There's so many factors in this. And then there's one massive, gigantic, enormous one that I wish and I hope that me bringing this up can make BMX come together on, is where we measure the rise of handlebars from. Because that is a factor that comes into this as well. You could have someone riding 875s that are measured differently than someone who's riding 8.5s or 8.25s, and if they're measured different enough, they could effectively, where you're talking about where someone's hands are actually at in physical space, be the same as those other options. Because some companies will measure from the middle of the tubing to the middle of the tubing. Some companies will measure from different parts of the tubing to different parts of the tubing than everybody else. And if we could get everybody on the same page, it would be really helpful when people are deciding. And maybe it doesn't even matter. Let's break it down even further to the fact that, like, how many people would notice a 0.2 or 0.1 inch difference in their hand placement if the placebo effect tells them, I have 8.75s, but they're actually 8.65s, or they're actually 8.95s, or they're actually 9s. How many people would notice that? And there are, I'm sure, people who would, but I think the majority of people would be like, oh, these bars feel different. Oh, I'm used to it in 10 minutes. I feel like it's only once you get to the highest level of riding where even your bars being different by a 0.05 hundredths of an inch could be felt. You probably will get those people noticing, but it's such a interesting conversation. I thought it would be a fun one to talk about. So Carl was also considering moving from the 9.5s that he's always known and loved. And based on this poll, which is crazy that it's skewed towards 9.25s by over 30 votes in the end, because for the whole first 12 hours, 9.5 was in the lead by a lot. And Carl has said that his 9.5s have been his best selling bars by far forever. And so I think he went with the 9.5s, but it's super interesting to see how many people ride 9.25s. And the conversation of bar measuring is something that I bring up with Carl's bars specifically too, because his old manufacturer for his bars when he first made the 4-piece versus the current manufacturing of these bars, the difference between both 9.5 inch versions is like an inch, just because they're measured differently. So that's what I'm saying. If we can get everybody on the same page, or at least, have an understanding of how the bars are measured and put that out there so that people can figure it out on their own, or you calculate. So you say, okay, for people who measure from center to center, our bars are 9.5s. That's what we say they are. That's what they are. But if you measure this way, they measure out to this, so that someone can go in and know that they're buying something that might be different than what they currently are riding. And you're probably listening to this video at this point like, dude, you are babbling, going nowhere with this. That's kind of the whole point. I just did this research to try and help Carl out and help him make a decision on what size bars to make. And I found a whole bunch of really interesting information as well as man, I just brain farted big time. I found a bunch of really interesting information as far as sizing goes, as well as different lengths people are willing to go to accommodate different bar sizes of handlebars that they really want to ride. And another factor in this too, there's so much nuance to this. Not only do forks have different steer tube lengths, so somebody who's riding the same bars on two different bikes can have them in different places, there's also the fact that you could use different amounts of headset spacers on the same forks to have the same bars, same stem, same everything be in different places. But then there's tire size, because if you think about it, different tire size, if you have a different tire size, if you have a bigger tire in the front than you do in the back, then it's going to tilt your bike up a little bit, which pushes your bars higher. So in relation to yourself and where you are on the bike, it shouldn't really affect too much because your handlebar location is more based on your axle being fixed and how high you move off the ground. You move and your bars move. But if it's tilted back like that, who knows? This is a very in-depth, nuanced conversation that kind of has me really thinking about this stuff in a way that's like, what is practical here? What actually makes sense? And I think all I can do is give you the data. Here's the data. Here's what I found. Carl's making 8.5s, 9s, and 9.5s. And then I think he's going to do a batch of 10s next time he does a run of bars. So those will be the options. And I think that what I'm landing on here with my personal thoughts on this is that going in a 1/2 inch increment with bars makes sense as like a manufacturer, especially considering that everything else is out there. Yeah, you could offer every single size under the sun. And if you're S&M bikes and you're making all of your bars in-house, then yeah, why not have an option for literally everyone so that everybody, if they're a fan of S&M, can buy S&M bars regardless of the model. They just find the geometry that they like, and that's the bars that they buy. But if you're a smaller company like Nowhere and you can't do that, then I think the 1/2 inch thing makes sense because you can either take headset spacers away or lower the rise on your stem, or you can add headset spacers and increase the rise of your stem to get your bars in the exact same place they would be if you rode that 1/4 inch or less below. And if you go a 1/2 inch down, well, then you're at the next size for the bars from 10, 9.5, 9, 8.5. And I don't know that he'll ever do an 8, but he also told me 10 years ago that he didn't think he ever wanted to be a parts company. So with all of this being said, is there a conclusion here? I think I just made my conclusion on this. I found it very interesting to see the lengths people would go to move their bars to where they want them and have the specific bars that they want. And I found it super, super intriguing and interesting. And I think that moving forward, I'll do more stuff like this so that we can have this it's unbiased data. It's neutral completely, as well as organic. It's a sample size of over 500 people who all ride BMX in all different genres of BMX from all over the entire world. I got responses and messages from literally the entire world. So I think it's cool, and it could hopefully only help to have this information out there. And I am here now asking you what size handlebars you ride, why, what stem do you ride, what's its rise, and how do you set up, and how do you know that you like your handlebar setup the way that you do, any way other than like, oh, it's just how I ride them and how it feels comfortable? Is there a practical reason for that? The top load stem helps with turn downs versus a front load stem being kind of in the way for a turn down, or anything else like that. with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Get excited for some new Nowhere 4-piece handlebars coming out soon. They are going to be lighter. They're going with an 075 tubing versus an 083. So it's going to be lighter, but hopefully just as strong. They're not heat treated. They're using thick tubing still. There's other companies in BMX that use 063 and sometimes thinner. So that's what I got for you. Handlebar rise is an interesting subject, and I hope that you found it just as intriguing as I did. Leave those comments down below, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another one. Goodbye.